Hey, welcome to Maxwell Leadership Podcast. This is the podcast that adds value to leaders because we know leaders multiply value to others. Today, I probably am in the most anticipated podcast maybe since our inception. That's not only because John Maxwell is here in studio live. So all of you that listen and work out and drive down the road, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, you need to go to YouTube, you need to download, because today and for the next 3 weeks, so 4 weeks of John Maxwell in studio talking to us about a subject that matters a lot to him. Let me explain. John Maxwell is releasing his new book. High Road Leadership is the book, and here's the purpose of the book: bringing people together in a world that divides. Now, if I could hear you, you would gasp like every audience where John speaks gasp when he says that. We're in a world that divides, and John Maxwell in this book is going to talk about how a high road leader is actually one that brings people together despite the division and the incredible polarizing culture that we're in today. So John, I am truly, not just because you're in the studio, not just because you're live, I'm truly excited. And John, I've not said this to you privately. This will be the first time you've heard this. In my opinion, I've been with you 25 years. You have been working on this book at least for 5 years, and let me explain why. It was 5 years ago that I heard you say, "I'm leadership sad." And I watched you work on that sadness and that disappointment and that challenge with today's leadership culture for the last 5 years until today we're able to bring to you, and those of you watching YouTube, I'm holding up a galley copy. I don't even have my hardback copy yet. It's coming to me this month just like it's coming to you. John, your answer to being high road or being leadership sad is this book, High Road Leader. And thank you for being here. I'm going to let you share a little bit, and then I want to ask you some questions this week as we kind of talk about the launch of this book, High Road Leadership.
Well, I'm so glad to be, of course, not only with you, Mark, but so many of the people that are on the podcast. You do such a great job leading it and moderating it, and it's become so popular. So I'm very pleased it's popular, but I'm very proud of you because you're the person that's kind of like the catalyst for it. But High Road Leadership is kind of like my leadership soul. It's, sometimes I teach leadership with my mind and things that I know that help people. But this is not more than just my mind. This is my soul, who I really am. And what I'm excited about the book is the fact that I think when you want to make change, you have to give a very clear picture of what that change should look like. People don't know how to make change without the picture. And in fact, they become very uncertain and insecure over it. And so high road leadership is a picture. It's a picture of what does a high road leader look like. And for the younger generation, I have grandchildren from 17 to 23. For that generation, honestly, they've not seen much high road leadership at all. They've seen a lot of low road or middle road leadership. And so the book is a picture of 12 distinguishing characteristics of what a high road leader really looks like. It's kind of like, okay, I see that now. I didn't realize that that's what a high road leader looked like. So once you put a picture in the mind of a person, then they begin to be able to see what they can be, what they should be, what they need to kind of emulate in their life. So that's the book. And we're going to be talking about it, especially in the next 3 episodes. Today, I'm kind of excited because I know you have some personal questions about me and leadership that our podcast leaders haven't heard before. And that's why I wanted to kind of maybe start with why I do what I do and why I've done it for so long, because it's a real passion of mine to make a difference in people's lives, which goes back to leadership and writing books. So today we'll just kind of go behind the scenes a little bit, and then the next 3 weeks we'll just really go into the pictures of a high road leader.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, I'm going to give you a chance to not only buy the book. I've got a place for you to go, highroadleadershipbook.com, for those of you that are impatient. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some things that we're doing on that website for you in the journey for high road leadership. But John, you're right. I want to go back, and we know you. This podcast community loves you. But tell us, why have you given your life to leadership?
Well, it really began on July 4th, 1976. I was in Lancaster, Ohio. I'm a kid. I'm a pastor. I'm in my 20s. And we have a growing church. We have 3,000 people in our church, and there's only 25,000 people in the whole town. And it's July 4th, the 200th anniversary birthday of America being a nation. And we were doing it outdoors because I didn't have facilities to handle. We had probably about 5,000 people that day. And so I'm outside and I'm teaching about America, doing a little bit of history, and America needs to be revived and renewed. And in the middle of my message, just completely out of the blue, much to my surprise, I really sensed, in the clearest way I've ever heard God talk to me, I just sensed right in the middle of my teaching that God was going to give me a ministry to train and develop leaders. And I finished the message, and on the way home, I was talking to Margaret, and I said, I think God called me today to train leaders. She said, "You're kidding." I said, "No." I said, I think he did. And she asked me, she said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" I said, "Nothing." I said, "Really, if this is God, I'm going to let him open the doors so I can be sure. I'll be glad to walk through them, but he's going to have to kind of open the doors." And he did. The next week, I literally received 2 separate invitations, and both of them said, "John, would you teach us how to lead?" And I started then. And honestly, from 1976, I've just had my plate full with people wanting to hear me talk about leadership. So it really began with a calling. Our friend Steve Harvey says, a career is what you get paid for, but a calling is what you're made for. So, I'm on this leadership journey because of a calling, but then I'm also on the leadership journey because of a major conviction. Right after that calling, I came to the conclusion that everything rises and falls on leadership. And that was a game changer for me. When I became convinced that everything rises and falls on leadership, I thought, what better thing can I do than to help people learn how to lead? If their success in life is going to be more determined by their ability to lead than anything else, then what a gift it would be if I could really tell people how to lead well so they could succeed well. And that comes out of the law of the lid, 21 laws. How well you lead determines how well you succeed. So it's a calling and it's a conviction. But then I had success leading. And that was life-changing for me. In other words, it's one thing to feel like this is what you should do, but it's nothing to be good at it. And, by the time back in Lancaster, this church I was talking to you about as I started off as a pastor, I'm 28 years old and I've got the 10th largest church in America. And people are coming to me and how are you building the church? And I said, well, I'm leading. I just know leadership. And so when you put those 3 things together, all of a sudden, it's just became who I was. I think what's the most important thing for our podcast team today is this. Now, that was 50 years ago. In fact, it was 50 years ago. What's incredible, Mark, is today I'm more convinced of that journey than I was at the beginning. As I look back, I'm saying to myself, I gave my life to something that really makes a difference in people's life. I have no regrets. I have, sometimes you start off and you think something, but the longer you're in it, it doesn't pan out to be true. I thought everything rises and falls on leadership when I was, 25, 26. Today, I know that's a fact. And so to give my life to something that has helped so many people that I know is a absolutely true principle of life that helps people succeed has been very rewarding. And so here we are. We're still doing it, buddy, and it's our life. It's what we do. It's what we love, and we love to help leaders, and that's the reason, of course, we even have the podcast. But that gets me to where I am today. The calling, the conviction, everything rises and falls, and then the success of leading itself. It was kind of like, if you're going to teach people how to lead, you have to be a good leader. And so that kind of gave me the credibility. If I was still pastoring, I'd say it was the calling, the conviction, and the credibility. I just thought of that. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. Write that down, podcast listeners.
I really did. The calling, the conviction, the credibility. But that's literally how I got to where I am today, no doubt.
So, John, I purposely asked the question, why have you given your life? And I want to make that distinction just really quick. And that is, you've given your life. Today, as we record this podcast live, you're 77, and there's no quit in you. and there's no letting up. And there's probably even more intentionality and intensity as it relates to giving your entire life, leaving it all on the field. Did that come from your dad? And like, why are you still 77 and still giving your life to leadership?
Well, it's because it works. It just works. People don't quit what they're good at. And so when somebody quits something, I'm pretty well assuming that they really didn't do it too well. They probably weren't dealing with a giftedness or a strength. But when you're really good at something and it works, now that's two things. You have to be good at it, and then it has to be fruitful, profitable. And that's what I would say is why I'm still in the game. And then also the people I work with. I wouldn't be in the game if it weren't for people like you, Mark, and our John Maxwell Enterprise, our team, our people. I love being with them. I love doing work with them. I love experiencing what I experience. And it's too fun of a journey for me to do a run by myself. And so running with the people that I run with and knowing that what I'm teaching makes an incredible difference in people's lives and watching their life get better, that keeps me in the game. What else would I want to do?
Hey, podcast listeners. Many of you listening right now would probably love the autonomy that comes with owning your own business or becoming a coach that helps other businesses succeed. Well, we have a phenomenal strategy where you are 100% in control of your own business, earning income on your own terms, and have access to the people, tools, and resources you need to build a thriving leadership development business. When you become a Maxwell Leadership Certified team member, you join a global community of entrepreneurs led by our expert team of mentors and faculty, including John C. Maxwell. You'll also get one of the top leadership certifications in the world next to your name, giving you the boost you need to get started. Visit us online at maxwellleadership.com/join the team to find out more.
And so I'm going to stay right here for one more second, John, because so many leaders, me and you, we have some friends that's quit just this year, that's quit high-level elite program college football, and they've stopped coaching because the world around them changed. And yet I'm watching you, which leads to this book that we're discussing the next 3-4 weeks. I'm watching you say, hey, I'm leadership sad. The leadership game has changed. Leadership has become polarizing. But rather than just throw up your hands, go sit on the beach with Margaret, your wife, and say, okay, y'all, it's all yours, next generation. Go figure it out. You're leaning in with us, writing a new book, in my opinion, one of the best, most timely books you've written, because there's something in you that says, I'm not going to quit. In fact, when the stakes are the most high, I'm going to lean in and lead in an incredible way. There's no question in that, but I want our podcast listeners to know I've been with John 25 years. The scope and scale of leadership has changed, and yet John is in the game. So I want to ask you something, John. What are some of the highlights in your leadership journey? I mean, you've had an incredibly blessed life. So what are some highlights?
Well, the first one sounds selfish, Mark, but it really isn't. If you'd ask me to do the highlights journey, the first thing I would say to you, the first highlight was the fact that I became a better leader. Now, that's not a selfish thing. That is a life-changing, transformational principle. The things that I believed and the things that I taught changed my life. And I became a better leader because of them. And that is a highlight. I mean, if it doesn't help you, if it doesn't change you, if it doesn't make you a better person, really, I'm not sure it could be a highlight. So it begins with the fact that I improved my leadership. And then the very fact that we began to, again, as you said earlier in the podcast, what do? We add value to leaders and multiply value to others. We began to train others and develop them, and to see them be successful and do well just compiled the highlight picture for me. And then a highlight that most people wouldn't consider to be a highlight because it's a process more than an event is the fact that I've taught leadership for over 50 years. I've written 90 books. I've spoken at least 13,000 times. There's something that's, when you talk about a highlight, I think a highlight to me is the fact that I've been in the game so long. I talk about consistency compounds and credibility does too. And today my influence factor is way beyond really who I am. In fact, one of the things I'm noticing, because I'm mentoring a lot of young leaders, which I really love. That's one of my favorite things I do. But I'm mentoring a lot of young leaders, and they're already starting to be successful, but they don't have the influence that they want to get. And what I'm learning to teach them is, and trying to help them, is the fact that influence follows success. It doesn't go before it. It doesn't accompany it. In other words, you've got to be good quite a while before people just begin to lean into you and you begin to have that influence factor with them. So, but it's a highlight, the fact that I've been doing this so long and the influence has increased. And then specifically, oh my gosh, the coaching company that we started, Mark, I mean, what a highlight that has been. I mean, that brings me so much joy. In fact, just last week, we're in Orlando with about 4,000, maybe 4,500 there. And to watch them growing and learning and helping people and watching them develop entrepreneur careers and making good dollars and helping people. The coaching company, they're the legs to my legacy. So that's a highlight. Transforming nations, Sunday, you and I get on the plane and we go to, Costa Rica and we go to Panama, and we'll be with two countries that we'll be with the leaders of the country. We'll be doing transformation there. Was huge. I don't talk too much about awards or whatever, but I was very touched when I got the Mother Teresa's award for peace and worldwide leadership. The time that I was able to speak at the United Nations, those are just highlights that are in my life. But really, the greatest highlight is just seeing people's lives change and my life being changed. Again, Jim Collins told me one time. In fact, you're with me. We were out in Las Vegas. We're having lunch together, and we're talking about transformation. Jim said, you have to be a transformational leader to transform a nation. And so when I talk about I became a better leader, that's the credibility. Us getting better ourselves is the credibility to teach others. In fact, honestly, if we didn't improve our lives, how in the world do we think we're going to improve someone else's life? If we didn't get better, how can we help someone else to get better? Again, we teach what we know, but we reproduce who we are. So those are some highlights that I just kind of think of.
So today, podcast family, our listeners, our viewers, by the way, John, there's going to be more viewers today because you're on and they want to see how good looking you're looking at 77.
Oh, they just want to say goodbye to an old man.
But to viewers, I'm holding up the galley copy. I don't even have my real copy yet. I'm holding up the galley copy of High Road Leadership. And the reason that we're doing this 4-part series is we're laying a foundation. Why, John, why now to this book? And you're just getting a little walk through history in today's episode. But some of you are not going to wait until the 4th week to go buy the book. So go to highroadleadershipbook.com. You'll be able to get free resources. There's already a download that you can have there of the first chapter. You'll be able to download the audio book there for those of you that listen to the podcast and want to hear the whole book audio. It's there, highroadleadershipbook.com. John, you get asked this question. You get asked questions literally every week about leadership. What's the best advice that you've received from your mentors?
Well, I love that question, Mark. And really, when people ask me about my personal growth in life, I tell them that there have been many ways I've grown personally. But the most effective way I think I've grown personally is through being mentored by people bigger, better, faster, smarter than me. And what mentoring has done for me is it just has increased my speed toward being where I wanted to be and becoming the person I wanted to really become. So when I think of mentors, I've had so many. I would start with my father, and the best mentoring advice he ever gave, and most of the podcast leaders know this one, so I'll just skip, or I'll just say it and move on, is my father, when I graduated, said, John, every day, if you'll value people, believe in people, and unconditionally love them, people will come to you as a leader always because they need to be valued, believed in, and unconditionally loved. So that was the kind of like the guiding principle of mentoring advice that I've had all my life. I do all my writing, all my speaking through that one. One of my first mentors was Elmer Towns, I affectionately call E.T., and he taught me, in fact, this is so much fun for the podcast listeners, because I'm going to spend, maybe 5 minutes on this. But, when I ask people what's the best advice they ever received, and they tell me, what they're doing is they're giving me good advice. And I mark it down. Well, I'm talking about my mentors in my life and what they have taught me. And what they've taught me now, I'm passing it on to you, and you're going to get your kind of 101 mentoring very quickly. Just from and Elmer told me, he said, he taught me the hot poker principle. He said, you take a fireplace and that poker, if you put it near the fire, it stays hot. If you remove it from the fire, it gets cold. And what he was teaching me was, you have to get yourself around hot people. You got to get yourself around good people, successful people. If you stay close to them, you'll be hot. If you don't stay close to them, you'll get cold. It's kind of like what you teach, Mark, on the power of proximity. It's the same thing. The hot poker principle that I learned 50 years ago from E.T., you're teaching in a kind of a different way in the power of proximity. And then, of course, I had Kirk Campmeyer, who at the Holiday Inn asked me what my personal growth plan was, and I didn't have one, and that day marked my life, because he said you have to be intentional in a personal growth plan. So every time I think of my growth in life, I go back to that breakfast, and thank God for Kirk Campmeyer. Les Parrott had written 6 books. I had no desire to write books. We were having lunch one day, and I asked him why he wrote books. He said, I write books to extend my influence beyond my own personal touch. I leaned into him that day at the table, said, I'm going to start writing books. That was catalytic for me to write. And it just made a big difference. John Wooden, gosh, he taught me so many things. But I think the greatest lesson I learned from John was that who mentors you is as important as what they say. To be around Coach Wooden was to have your life change. He was contagious. Who he was carried every bit as much weight as what he said. And when I left him every time, I felt bigger. I felt like I've grown more. I'm going to be able to do more. And so that teaching, he said, John, who mentors you is as important as what they say. And Olin Hendricks, I can remember in Pasadena having a lunch with him, and he put on a napkin, growth means change. And he looked at me and said, John, if you're going to be a growing person, if you're going to have growing companies, you're going to be changing all the time. He said, don't ever get in this thought of, we got it and we want to hold it. He said, you're going to constantly, and he was also that day, he said, I said, growth, it means change. But he said, change doesn't mean growth. He said, I want you to understand, what I'm telling you is you can change a bunch of stuff. In fact, you can become worse because you change. He said, I'm not glorifying change. I'm identifying growth. And he said, if you grow, you're going to keep on changing. A life change. Jim Collins, I just mentioned a little bit earlier, said that you have to be a transformational leader to lead transformation. That was huge. I was working on a business degree at Northwood of Indiana, and I had a business professor teach me the Pareto principle. And the day that he was teaching that Pareto principle in the class, I can't even describe my feeling. The rest of the class, they were taking notes, and I looked around and I said to myself, that man is teaching me something right now that's going to be major in my life. And that, of course, the Pareto principle teaches you all about priorities. Fred Smith was the one who taught me that the gift itself, our giftedness, is greater than the person. My gosh, how that changed my perspective upon who I am and what I do versus the gifts that I have. And then Jack Welch, said, John, you need to create legs to have a legacy. In fact, it's one of the last things he said to me before he died. And I said, okay, I'm going to get some legs for my legacy. And that's kind of was the catalyst, Mark, for the coaching company. And Peter Drucker drilled in, taught me a lot of things, but the thing that was most life-changing is he said, there's no success without a successor. You got to have somebody to pass that baton off. And of course, that's what I'm doing with you. But he said, who are you going to get that baton to and say, here, you take it. And then Pat Summitt, the great coach at University of Tennessee, basketball coach. I mean, she's the one that sat down one night at dinner and said the biggest mistake she made in her leadership at the beginning is she was leading by assumptions. And she just assumed her players knew these things, and she assumed her players could do these things. And she said it was a total miss. And I had to back down. I had to go say, no, I got to get on the same page with them. And it was really, I asked questions a lot. And that was one of the catalytic times, that conversation. I thought, a person leads by assumptions, Mark, because they don't ask questions. If you ask questions, you won't lead by assumptions. You're going to find it out. But if you don't become committed to asking your people questions all the time, you're going to start assuming things. And that was kind of catalytic for me to begin asking questions. That became catalytic for my book, Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. I mean, it all started there. So anyway, that's not all my mentors. When I was thinking about mentors, I knew you were going to ask me that question, Mark. I thought to myself, sometime I think I'm going to write a book on mentors that have made a difference in my life. I mean, just think about it. Because what I did right there is gave all the podcast listeners, the people who watch, I gave them a crash course on great teachings from great mentors. And just think, I mean, I don't mean this unkindly. I could give me an hour and I could put 100 out there in front of you and what they taught me. So I think it's so important to be mentored well by people. That they've helped me a lot. That's for sure.
So, John, thank you. Every person listening to this podcast, every one of them, consider you their mentor. Every one of them. I meet them around the globe, and every one of them says, John Maxwell is my mentor. And you mentor a lot of people, hundreds of thousands a week on this podcast. And for you then to talk about the power of mentoring in your life so that we can know our mentor has had powerful mentors was a great gift. By the way, podcast listeners, go back and rewind that portion, because under every one of those mentors, John just didn't name drop. He told you the life-impacting message that he learned from them, and there's gold in that listening if you will go back and listen to the last 5 to 7 minutes. John, I'm holding up, I don't know if you know this, but I verified it this morning. I'm holding up number 89, which you and I know what that means is number 90 is a special book, but we're going to bring you back live to talk about that in June or July. But let me tell you this, because by the way, John's already released this book. He's already working on the next book. That is the John Maxwell that we know. John, number 89, you have become the leadership guru of the world, recognized by Inc., recognized by a business journal here in America. You're known around the world. What are your top 5 leadership books that you've written?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I'm not starting number 1 of 5. I'm just going to probably give it to you chronologically. So the first one, if I did it chronologically, would be Developing the Leader Within You 2.0. And the reason Mark's kind of clapping there is many times Mark has told me that was his favorite leadership book. And what that was a breakthrough book. In fact, that book put me on the map because I was the first person to write a book that said leaders can be developed. Most times people thought that leaders just were born. You were a born leader or you weren't. So developing a leader, and it's a huge mentoring book because it gives you 10 things that you need to teach your team that they have to do well to lead well. So that would be one. Obviously, the second one is the one I'm known most for, is the 21 Laws of Leadership. That's the best-selling leadership book ever written. In fact, Developing a Leader Within You 2.0 is the second best leadership book ever written. I wrote a book called The 360-Degree Leader. And that I went to New York City, and at the Waldorf Astoria, that they gave me the award. That was the business book of the year for America. And the guy that gave it to me told me afterwards, he said, that book, what they do is they literally have a polling or a voting on which is the best business book that year. He said it won by the widest margin of any business book ever. And I think it's because it was a different take on leadership. It was talking 360. You lead from the middle, you lead up, you lead sideways, you lead down. That's that 360 feel. So, but that is a fabulous book to help people learn how to lead people above them, beside them, and beneath them. The fourth book would be The 5 Levels of Leadership. In the corporate world, it's the Bible. And the 5 Levels of Leadership is all about how to develop yourself from level 1 up to level 5. But I think what makes it really powerful is that it's also how to develop someone else from level 1 to 5. In other words, it literally is a game plan. If you got somebody on your team and they're on level 1, the book teaches you, okay, how to get to level 2, level 3, on up. So the 5 levels of leadership. And then the book I wrote right before COVID, Leader Shift. You know, that just, even today, in fact, I'm going to Denver here in a couple of days on the way to Costa Rica and Panama. And the company I'm going to go speak for, they said, you just have to do leadership. And it's requested a lot. It's all how to be agile. It was written before COVID, but you would think I would have written it during COVID, because it's how do you pivot? How do you flex with the times and lead? Now, you asked for 5, but I have to give you 6. So I'm sorry. Because high road leadership would be number 6 without any question. And let me just say something about high road leadership. This is going to be, for me, as a father and a grandfather, this is going to be the mentoring book I have for my grandchildren. Again, ages 23 down to 17. And they read my books. I've paid them to read my books. But they read my books. But these kids, they've not seen enough good high road leadership. And so my mentoring project for 2024 is I'm getting a book for each one of the grandchildren. And we're going to go through it, and we're going to take the 12 distinguishing characteristics of a high road leader, and we're just going to learn them and practice them. And it's going to be so much fun, because what I'm going to do is each time we take another distinguishing characteristic or practice of a high road leader, we're going to then say, okay, let's go try that for X amount of time, and let's come back and talk about it. And so they're going to learn it, but they're going to learn high road leadership, but they're going to practice high road leadership, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, you asked for 5, I gave you 6.
Well, John, I'm going to let you kind of entice us to come back next week in just a moment. But podcast family, let me talk to you for just a moment. I travel the world with John Maxwell, and there's not a place that I don't go into that we, number one, don't meet one of our Maxwell Leadership Certified team members. They're everywhere, and they are there to serve you. If you ever meet one of them, they will serve you. The second thing that happens every place that I go is somebody comes up and says, I love the podcast. It's changing my life. That was no exception this week when I was at my daughter's her 12th grade cheerleading banquet, and Coach Parker, her basketball coach, came up and said, I just listened to Maxwell Leadership Podcast for the first time. So Coach Parker, and to many of you podcast friends, welcome. We're glad you're here. You have joined on a good week if this is your first week, and if you're a long time, you're continuing for the right time, because for the next 3 weeks after today, so 4-week series, John Maxwell and I are going to be sharing about high road leadership, bringing people together in a world that divides. You can go to highroadleadershipbook.com right now. You can pre-order the book. You can download the audio book. You can get some free digital resources that we've created. There's even a talk there that John has done on high road leadership that you can download. But podcast family, I'm going to challenge you with one thing before I throw it back to John and we wrap today. We do our best week in and week out to add value to you. We bring it to you. We have considered all kind of financial mechanisms with the podcast, and we've kept it free because we've added value and want to add value to you. But today I'm going to challenge you to step up. I'm going to challenge you to step up like John just said, and I want you and your family to go through this book as soon as possible. Now, every week I'm going to challenge you every week with somebody that I want you to bring this message to equip this message with. But today, I want you to put it inside of you, put it inside of your family. I want you to order it. Please do me a favor. Order one for every member of your family. And like John is doing with his grandkids, take this book and do a study. The next generation needs a model at home on how to lead, because they're not getting a model anywhere else in society right now. So make this book your family study. Make it your personal study over the next 3 to 4 weeks. And by the way, for you overachievers, hurry up and do it this week, because next week I've got another challenge for you as we continue to dig into high road leadership. John, thanks for today. Thanks for hanging out with us for the next 3 weeks as well. I'll just let you send everybody off with a challenge about high road leadership.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. The next podcast, we're going to pull back the curtains on why I wrote high road leadership. And again, we're going to talk about more than just the book itself. The book is a tool to help people have a picture of what a high road leader looks like. But almost all great works they're birthed out of the heart of a person, and that's why they're created. And so in the podcast, we're going to talk about, why I wrote high road leadership, and then we're going to just start getting practical and helping people become a high road leader. I can hardly wait for that time.
So, highroadleadershipbook.com. Join us on YouTube. John's going to be here hanging out with us for 3 more weeks. We'll see you there. By the way, why High Road Leadership? Because everyone deserves to be led well.